Hello, everyone. This is Carol Dimitrov with OPA Community Outreach, and today we're really pleased to have Michael Ofek with us. Michael is going to be talking about the rulers of life, the Hellenistic procedure of finding the main rulers of the chart. The ancient doctrine of finding the rulers of life was a very important and fundamental preliminary stage before any in-depth analysis or predictions could be done. Singling out the most important planets in a chart with their unique roles and hierarchy gives a coherent model for the dynamics of life as a whole. Finding these rulers is not an easy job. Some ancient authors even say it is the most difficult of tasks, but also one of the most rewarding. This is a very intricate system and also sheds light on an ancient metaphysical model. And a little bit about Michael. Some of you might know Michael already. He's done a few presentations for OPA. He is a professional astrologer, writer, and teacher from Israel. He has been practicing and researching the traditional lineage of astrology with an emphasis on Hellenistic astrology and its connection with Greco-Egyptian cosmology, philosophy, and magic. His passion lies in unveiling and reconstructing the conceptual roots of the tradition of the reintegration of these ancient arts. He is also the co-founder of the Israeli professional astrology magazine, Urania, which also produces yearly conferences and workshops. And you can see his website for more information on Michael. It's www.ofek-sky.com. And with that, Michael, I will mute myself and it's all yours.
Thank you, Carol. And thank you everyone for joining. So the topic for today is the rulers of life. And this is a doctrine which is really very intricate and has a lot of, I would say, derivative techniques and things that are attached to it further on in different prediction techniques and other auxiliary techniques dealing with different subjects of life. But in essence, this is maybe the most preliminary thing that an ancient astrologer would look at to prioritize, you might say, the weight of the planet responsibility on the native's life. The first time I gave this presentation was in 2017 for Kepler College, and that was about 2 hours long. And even in 2 hours, it was a bit difficult to put everything inside. So we only have 1 hour. So of course, I had to omit a lot of interesting and important details, but hopefully the most important ones we will talk about today. So let's jump in. So what is this system and where did it originate? Well, first of all, this rulership system that we are going to talk about was used for assessing the general predominant quality of life, its general directive, and the manner of its execution. The ancients, they didn't look at all planets as created equal. For them, there was a kind of hierarchy in a chart, which planets assume different authoritative rules and predominate differently in each figure. So this system was a system to differentiate those hierarchies and the different roles the planets possess in every individual chart. So it served as the most preliminary study of the chart, orienting and prioritizing its member into the ruling classes. and then signaling out their function and hierarchical order of importance to the life story. And the part of this technique, specifically finding the Predominator and Domicile master, which we will, of course, talk about later, was also used to assess the length of life. So this is part of the longevity techniques. And this was something that was also very preliminary because as Ptolemy says in his Tetrabiblos, you can't really delineate a chart for someone who is going to die soon. You know, if he's has only like a couple of years to live, then you wouldn't start by predicting, you know, things to when he's older, etc. So the first thing an Hellenistic astrologer would do was assess this hierarchy, the quality of the life, and also the length of the life before he would start delineating different topics and doing different prediction techniques. So there are three main rulers, sometimes more than three, but generically there are three main rulers that we are going to talk about, which are part of this system. The first one is the Predominator. The Predominator, or in Greek, the Epikratetor, which is also considered the Apheta or the Hylek in later tradition, is the ruler, the most general ruler of the life. Apheta means release, to release something. He's the distributing or releasing the life energy for that individual. So this is the highest ruler. Without life, there is no chart, there is no personality, there is nothing. So this is the emanation of life, or the predominating emanation of life in any individual life, in any individual chart. The second ruler in importance is the Domicile master. And the Domicile master, or in Greek, the Oikodespotes. Oikos means house, and despotes means the master. He's also later was also called the Alkokoden, or the giver of years. And it was also considered to be the personal daimon or angel by certain sources. That's a whole different doctrine, which is interesting on itself, but we will not get too much into the depth of this. And the third ruler is called the Lord, just the general word for the Lord of the Nativity, which in Greek is Kurios. And this Lord was also sometimes considered the personal daimon. So there's, I would say, a debate which one of them. And there are different ways to find this personal daimon. But as I said, we cannot get too much deep into this doctrine. So these are the three main rulers of the life. This is a quote from Antiochus, which probably lived around 100 BC or a little bit before. At least this is speculated by Robert Schmidt. And in Robert Schmidt's translation of its introductory matters, he says this. And he says that for Nechepso the king, with whom Petoziris also agrees, the things under investigation fall within our grasp from the examination of the domicile master and the Lord. For whereas the domicile master does indeed show the vital times of man, the Lord shows the manner of life of those who must perish. Robert Schmidt gives a note that the word for indeed can also be translated as an even or also. So it might be that what the author is saying is that the domicile master not only shows the quality of life, which is the general significance, which is its general signification, but also the vital times, because it was used for longevity techniques, and it was the primary law by which they used the primary directions to see if he hits the Anareta or the killing planet, and that would symbolize the time of death. I'm just recalling that on the first slide, I managed to skip one essential point, that this doctrine is said to originate from Nechepso, the king, and Petosiris, which is probably one of his priests, which are probably the originator of most of the Hellenistic doctrine, astrological doctrines, and we don't have a lot that was survived from their texts. Only a couple of quotes in Valence and other sources. Okay, let's move on. So before we get into the more technical elements of finding the rulers of the life, let's try to establish some of their philosophical principles. And I want to say from advance that this is my reconstruction of these philosophical connections. And these connections appear everywhere. We don't have time to show and prove all this, but this is the way I formulated it. Every one of the rulers is connected to one of the hypostases, which is one of the levels of the emanation of being, or the cosmology of the world, yeah, of creation. So according to Neoplatonism, and of course Platonism itself, there were essentially three hypostases. The first was nous, or consciousness, also considered intellect. The second one was soul, or psyche, and the third one was phasis, was matter, was body. So the rulers are intimately connected with those levels of being, and they are also connected to the different levels of faith as articulated in the Hermetic texts, mostly in the Corpus Hermeticum, but also are alluded to in different astrological texts. So the first ruler, the Epikratetor, or the Predominator in English, is probably connected and associated with the noetic principle, which is the principle of consciousness, of life, of awareness, of the animating power. And it is connected to the level of faith, which is pronoia, which in English is providence, because it gives the form of the life. It gives the laws by which the life is governed, and it provides for it in a sense. It's the blueprints for the life. The second ruler is called the Oikodespotes, or the domicile master, is connected to the hypostasis of the psyche, or the soul. And this ruler is, in a sense, the one that fulfills the noetic principle, or mediates between consciousness and nature, or the body, which is what the soul does. The soul animates things in time. It takes from the model of the form and puts it to life, moves it into the body. And it's connected to the level of fate called hemarmene, which is a very general word for fate and destiny, fate or destiny in Greek. And in Hermetic texts, the planets are said to be, sorry, I sometimes need to think a little bit to find the English words. The planets are the instruments of hemarmene. So the planets, which are the moving principle, the soul principle of the cosmos, are the instruments of fate. So they weave what is fated, in a sense. So the Oikodespotes has to do with the psyche. And the Kurios, which is the Lord of the Nativity, has to do with the physis, has to do with nature, because it interfaces between the soul and the world, and it's an executive power. Executive? Not sure that's how you say it. It's executing things in the world, in the physical environment, in the external expression of the life. So it is, in a sense, connected to the level of faith, which is ananke, which is the necessity, which is the expression of the laws of faith in the earth, and the inherent qualities of matter and space and time, which are necessitated, in a sense. This, I'm doing this very fast, and I'm a little sorry for that, but it's better than nothing, probably, because that's a rich conceptual framework, which I hope maybe to one day elaborate more. Another model which can help put some metaphysical principles into this system is connected with the light model, which if you follow my work a little bit, you know that I argue that most of the astrological language is connected or defined from the principle of light and visibility and reflection and vision. And I can reverse engineer most of the astrological concept through the principles of light. And I did that, and I also introduced that in UAC 2018 in a lecture, and did a full workshop on that also a year before. So this is just to give you a very simplified way to connect the light model. The Predominator is always one of the lights. It's either the sun or the moon. Sometimes it can be the ascendant or the MC, but that That's really rare. But it signifies the light of one's being, the living essence. You might say the fountainhead of the animating power of life itself in each one of us. And the more we go down from these principles into the more specific expression of our soul and our bodies in the world, then we specify this energy more and more and differentiate it. So the domicile master, which most of the time is the ruler of these, either the sun and moon, and of course the sign itself that the predominator is in, are filtering the light to one of the spectral expressions of the solar energy, which is the sun, of course, which is the signs, of course. And because each sign is ruled or is the heavenly domicile of a planet, so that planet has the authority to mediate that light, and he serves as a focal point that directs and manages the distribution of the light. So this is the animating cause, this is the psuche, this is the soul in a sense, but it's also what is unique in the soul, which is also a part of what is a soul according to Aristotle. It is what's unique about someone. Yes, it's the it's the Michael in me. It's not only what animates me; it's what makes me Michael and not someone else. Okay? So it's the more specific formal quality and patterns of life, and it serves to guide and shape and direct, and also show the intensity, the quality that the life is striving for. Because according to the ancients, the soul or the form is said to grow into the body in time and move the material towards it more and more. So the domicile lord shows the model that the life is growing into. And becomes more evident as the life progresses. So it's kind of the potentiality of life, and it's, in a sense, it's the formal cause of one's life, or the specific formal qualities of one life. And when I say formal, I mean it in the Greek philosophy sense. Yes? It's the form, it's the essence, it's the blueprint, it's the idea. So the domicile master is, in a sense, the typecast of the person. It's the general plus specific idea of one's life. I'm saying general plus specific because there's the general quality of the planet, but there's a specific placement and configuration and different nuances which each chart has that brings this to be individual and unique. Finally, the Lord of the Nativity is the planet that is in charge in interfacing the entity or the soul with the outside world. So it has more to do with the body. It had most to do with the expression of the life in external action in the world. So the Lord of the Nativity, in a sense, is guiding the soul. It's guiding the form to its interaction with the outside world and with the outside world, material world, of course. Another model, this is the last one that I'm going to propose, is based on what Robert Schmidt has termed the nautical paradigm. And Robert Schmidt, if you haven't heard his name, he's one of the translators, maybe the chief translator of the Greek astrological materials. And Robert Schmidt has said that that probably the nautical paradigm is probably the overarching paradigm of many of the astrological concepts. Of course, I argue that this is the light paradigm, but there are many paradigms inside the text. So this one has a lot of what's the word for that? A lot of testimonies. Yes, like you probably, most of you know that the ruler of the ascendant, sorry, is called the helm of the ship. And the ruler of the ascendant is called the helmsman. So many bits of pieces of this doctrine are scattered around in the texts. And this is one instance of this. In this specific doctrine, even Porphyry tells us that each of these rulers has its own meaning, just as the ship owner and the steersman have their different roles in the, concerning the ship. So this drawing is taken from a fragment of the Book of the Dead, and this is the solar barge, yes? And we see Ra, the sun god, in the middle, which is, for me, analogous to the Epikratetor, or to the life-giving energy. And I can't move the mouse here. No, I can't. Okay. So the little bird behind Ra is called the Bennu, and it's very ancient Egyptian deity. It's linked with the sun, with creation and rebirth. It's probably the first model for the phoenix in the Greek, the Egyptian mythology. So it's connected with the sun, and it's said to be the soul of Ra, or the Ba of Ra, which is one of the elements of the soul in the Egyptian psychology, which is most associated with the psyche in Greek. So this is, in a sense, the Oikodespotes. It's the soul power of the Epikratetor that creates, that moves things in the, that gives it its specific form, in a sense. But one can also say that the whole ship is the Oikodespotes. Oh, we're already 8:30. Wow. That's a kind of pathology with me. I don't do well with Saturn. Okay, let's move in haste. And the Kurios, of course, stands at the foreground of the ship, and it guides the life in the seas of life. Okay, so just a quick overview of the more of the astrological elements associated with the rulers. So the predominator is always either the sun or the moon, and sometimes in rare cases it's the ascendant or the MC. The domicile master is the planet ruling either the sign or the term of the predominator. We will talk about the specifics later. And the lord of the nativity is the planet disposing most aphetic or life distributing vital points in the chart, ruling or disposing them, either the MC, the ascendant, the moon, the lord of fortune, or the prenatal lunation, and is most essentially and accidentally dignified. Essentially dignified by rulership or exaltation, etc., and accidentally dignified by being angular, by being in its own sect, by being in phases, which is solar phase, rising, helically rising or setting, and other different phases, and of course, good aspects, etc., and also has the overall connections in the chart. So the Lord of the Nativity is the planet most fit to take action in the world. Therefore, the angularity and ruling the angles, it's much more important in a sense than the rulership or the things that have to do with the essential. So let's talk about each of them very fast, and then we'll start moving into the examples. So the Predominator is the giver and distributor of light and life, i.e. consciousness and life form, or mind or soul, because all levels of being exist in the sun, or the predominating light. In this case, it can also, in other cases, it can also be the moon. But all levels of being exist in the light, in a sense. So this luminary is the strongest animating power in the chart, the most general predominant significator of life as a whole on all levels. The Domicile master is the planet in charge of life and its distribution. It hosts the life and is therefore responsible to provide for it and direct it. He acts as a constricting formative cause, shaping and modifying the life with time. This planet exhibits the generic character of the individual soul, which further differentiates and mediates the life energy. Okay, I'll do this very fast. This is the Domicile master as the personal diamond coming from the Egyptian mysteries of Yamlichos. And it's a little complex because there's he argues that there's no one domicile rulership or something of that sort, but I won't get into that now. But in a sense, the guardian, the personal diamond becomes the guardian of the common living principle of the whole entity, of the soul and the body. So this is a beautiful quote from that. And it's connected, of course, to the whole mythology that the soul chooses the daimon before the incarnation, which comes from the myth of air and the republics. Probably that's the source. Okay, but I'll have to move on from that. The Lord of the Nativity. This is the planet that is in best shape and placement to act in the world. He has the responsibility to execute the directive of both the Predominator and Domicile master in accordance with his own character and signification. Sometimes this Lord and the Domicile master are the same planet, in which case it is said to be very powerful and there is an ideal unison of plan and execution. This is something Porphyry tells us. Okay, so I kind of being repeating myself because I'm specifying things and repeating some of the things I said before, only for grounding the concept before we get into the technical detail of the chart examples. Okay, so how do we find the Predominator of life? The candidates for the Predominator are the two luminaries, and as we said before, in special cases, the ascendant or the MC. I'm hearing a lot of noises from outside, so I'm going to close the window. One second. Okay. Sorry for that.
That sounds better. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. So the most general defining parameter for the luminary's predominance over the life is the sect of the chart. That means that the sun becomes the predominator by day and the moon becomes the predominator by night. This is the most general statement that is repeated by mostly every source. But some of the sources tell us that there's much more to this. And this is according to Antiochus and Porphyry. If the luminary of the sect is also on the ascendant, then its predominance is secure. Okay, if it's a day chart, the sun in the ascendant is always a day chart, then it's the predominator. There's no doubt about it. If it's a night chart and the moon is on the ascendant, there's also no doubt about it. But if the luminary, which is contrary to the sect, is angular, it will predominate if the other light is cadent. In other words, if it's a day chart, but the moon is angular, while the sun is in a cadent house, either the 12th or the 9th in a day chart, then the moon would be the predominator, even if it's a day chart. Okay. The out of sect light will also predominate from succeeding houses. If you don't know what sect means, sect is the governance of either the day or the night. Of course, the moon governs the night and the sun the day, and it's a whole doctrine also connected to the planets. Each planet is divided also by being the diurnal or nocturnal, but we can't go into the details of this. But when I say the out of sect light, I mean the light that is not ruling either the night or the day of the birth. Okay, so if it's a day chart, the out of sect light, of course, is the moon. So the out of sect light will also predominate from succeeding houses, mainly the second and the 11th, because the second is about to rise to the first, and the 11th is about to rise to the 10th. If the light of the sect is cadent. So it's continuing the second, it's continuing the second sentence. And now it's saying that the luminary, which is out of sect, will also predominate in succeeding houses if the light of the sect is cadent. If the two lights are cadent, then the ascendant will take the predomination. Okay? If both lights are falling from an angle, are in a cadent house, then the ascendant will take the predomination. This is what Antiochus and Porphyry tells us. Okay? And they also give us a couple of examples. Okay? So here we can see looking to the left, we see the moon on the ascendant and the sun in a cadent house. So even though it's a day chart, the moon is the predominator. On the right, we see that the sun is on the ascendant while let's say it's below the ascendant, which is technically considered a night chart. When the moon is in a cadent house in the 9th, then the sun will predominate, even though it's technically a night chart. Another example the other example is the succeedent house example. When the moon is in the 2nd, about to rise, and the sun is in the 12th, although it's a day chart, the moon predominates. Okay. And if the sun and the moon are cadent, then the ascendant will predominate. Okay? So essentially, this is the algorithm. Okay, this specific formulation was done by Robert Schmidt in Definition and Foundation. I just added the or 12 because the sun in the ninth. I added or 12 because in my understanding of the text, sun in the ninth is paradigmatic for all cadent houses, and in the day chart, for the sun can only be either in the ninth or the 12th. So I think the 12th is also considered here. So if you think that this is complicated, then it gets much, much complicated than this. It's not that straightforward. So the predominator is not always the sun in the day chart or the moon in the night chart. There are other rules given by Vettius Valens and around 20 more instances and examples like the one given in Porphyry and Antiochus, which I did walk through all of them in the lecture I gave at Kepler, but we won't go into all of them now. I think we will also go, okay. If both luminaries are strongly placed, the predominator will be the one ruling the sect and or in its own triplicity. So if both of them are strongly placed, the one ruling the sect and in its own triplicity would be the predominator. If both are weakly placed, the ascendant or MC will predominate. If the sun is in Leo or the moon is in Cancer, the luminary in the appropriate configuration with the ascendant or the MC will predominate. And this is different nuances, because if you see that both moon and the sun are strong, see which one is better configured, in a better configuration to the ascendant or the MC, preferably by an exact aspect. If the sun and moon are in their sign of fall, sign of the moon of the fall of the sun is Libra and the moon Scorpio, they cannot be the predominator unless they are exactly on the ascendant. This is the rule of valence. And if the moon is new or under the radius of the sun, it will not be the predominator unless it is exactly on the ascendant. This is Valens' algorithm. I went over all the graphical examples because it's too much. And we won't read all the algorithm, but I'm having that slide here for those of you who wants to pause on the recording and go deeper. But let's continue. Okay, my first example. And we only have 15 minutes left. Wow, that was challenging. Okay, Diana, Princess of Wales. Let's do that fast. Who's the predominator? Is this a day chart or a night chart? This is a day chart. The sun is above the horizon. So essentially, the sun should be the predominator. Is the moon challenging the predomination of the sun? Not really, because it's in the second quadrant house or the third whole sign house, and the sun is succeedent to the angle of the seventh, and if you take the quadrant houses, which we will, then it's in the seventh quadrant house, so it's angular and it's strong. So for Diana, Princess of Wales, the sun is the predominator. Okay, for Donald Trump, do you think Donald Trump is a solar or lunar kind of person? Of course, he's a solar one, yeah? And the sun predominates in the daylight, and it's about to culminate to the MC. So the sun is the predominator here. Let's just move. Okay. So how do we find the domicile master? The domicile master is the sign ruler of the predominator. The bound ruler is considered the joint ruler. So the general ruler of the predominator is the domicile master. So let's say in the case of Donald Trump, it would be Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini. And the term ruler would be Mars, because the sun is in the terms of Mars. Okay? So although some sources use the bound ruler as the only domicile master, and some make the sign ruler the joint ruler. So it changes a bit from author to author. Valence uses the term ruler. I think Dorotheus uses the term ruler. Others use the sign ruler. Antiochus uses the sign ruler. So I would take both. But we should differentiate their roles, and this is the next sentence. The sign ruler shows the type of quality and the focus of the life energy, and the bound ruler shows a narrower limiting principle governing its expression. Ideally, these two need to be in aspect or some kind of mutual relationship for the best harmonious fulfillment of the life's directive. It is also important for the rulers to aspect the predominator, the other light, the ascendant, or the lord of the nativity. Okay, so let's take Princess of Wales again. The ruler of the predominator is the moon, and the ruler of the term is Venus. Now, in general, and I won't get into that because it's a little bit complicated, but probably the ancients would have not taken one of the luminaries as a domicile master. So if you have one of the luminaries as a domicile master, you can look for the exaltation ruler of the sign if they have one, and here is the exaltation of Cancer is Jupiter, or just a buffer to the term ruler as the chief ruler. Here Venus is the term ruler. Venus is in general is able to see the light, even though not in an exact aspect, but by sign, and the moon does not, which gives more weight to Venus. So here Venus is the domicile master of Diana, Princess of Wales, and Venus situated pretty good by sign, although not that good by house. If you take the whole sign houses, it's in the 6th sign from the ascendant. So one should also judge the ruler, of course, by all the parameters that you would judge a planet in the ancient system. Is it a benefic or malefic? Is it in sect? Is it in one of the spaces of rulership? Is it making an appearance or likely rising? Is it angular, etc., etc.? And the aspects it gets, and whatever it does in the chart, gives its individual quality. Okay, that was a little fast, but hopefully we'll have a little bit more time to go over it again in another example. So the last ruler, this is the most complex ruler to find. Porphyry describes two methods of finding the Kurios. The first one, the Kurios is either the ruler or of the MC, mostly if he's himself on one of the angles, a planet on the MC or closest to the MC, or a planet in the 11th, which is the sign culminating after the sign of the MC. So you can see that in the first method that Porphyry gives us, there's a lot of emphasis on the midheaven, a ruler of the midheaven, planets on the midheaven, etc. So it's probably a very important point to consider. The second method, we look, the candidates are the ruler of the ascendant or a planet in the sign or bound of the ascendant, the ruler of the moon, the ruler of the MC again, the ruler of the Lord of Fortune, the planet helically rising, setting, or stationing 7 days before or after the birth. And Porphyry tells us if there's more than one, take the one rising, helically rising. And the ruler of the bounds of the prenatal lunation. So here one should consider the dispositor of all these points, and also a planet which is himself angular, either on the ascendant or on the MC or on an angle while ruling the ascendant or the MC. If he also rules the moon or the Lord of Fortune, then then its rulership is secured. And if he's also helically rising, then he's also very fit to be the ruler. And of course, the more accumulated instances, the better. This is also, I think, the first instance that we see something close to the Newton, the more medieval form of finding a ruler that disposes many important elements in a chart. And also Ptolemy uses the term Oikodespotes for this kind of ruler, and not only for the ruler of the light. So there's a lot of mix and a lot of confusion in the terms. But this is probably the most ancient form of this technique. Porphyry also tells us from all this, the ruler will be the planet having the most empowering condition and is best situated relative to the whole chart. And the conditions are the closest to helically rise, in its own sect and places of rulership, on an angle or preceding an angle, and gets a supportive configuration, preferably for benefics, one of the most aspected in general, specifically to the other rulers of the life. Okay? So these are other elements which we should look at for the planet that is the Lord of the Nativity. And I think this is the only concept that in some sense has remained in modern astrology. Some say that the Lord of the Ascendant is the ruler of the Nativity. So as you see here, it's much more complicated than that. And the Lord of the Ascendant is not always, it's always important, but it's not always the Lord of the Nativity. Okay, so let's take Frida Kahlo. Okay, let's do the whole thing with Frida Kahlo and see where we go. This is a little bit more complex example because it's a bit harder and less obvious which of the luminaries are the predominator in a chart. So let's see, this is a day chart. So the sun would be our first choice. But we see that the moon is culminating to the MC. And the moon, although it's in a critical degree and is, in the term of Mars and is just going to change signs, is still exalted. And now, if we take the whole sign house system, then the sun is in the 12th whole sign. So it has a cadency to it. It's not in the quadrant cadent house, but in the whole sign, creating house. And I, for one, do not ignore this. I combine both houses. Although for this power, for seeing the more imminent power of a planet, I take the coordinate angles, of course, the MC, the ascendant, and not the 10th house if it's a different sign. Sorry, if not the 10th sign if it's in a different house. So let's continue. So essentially we would pick the sun, but we see that the moon gives it challenges very much. So essentially, there's not really a black and white, even though the ancients were dealing with the economy of taking one planet and doing the certain predictions from that planet, etc. In real life, there's no black and white. There's different shades of gray. And in this chart, Frida Kahlo exhibits a very dominant lunar quality, even though this is a day chart. So you can say it's 50-50 or 70-30. If we consider that the moon is also the ruler of the sun, then it gets even more weight in the authority over her life. So I would say that the moon here is a predominator. So if we take the moon as the predominator, then the sign ruler of the moon, which is the domicile master, is Venus. So Venus has, in a sense, the typecast or the authority to distribute the life energy through her significations. So this is the chart of an artist, and Venus, as the soul, in a sense, is the animating power ruling the light of her life, is the dominant domicile master of her chart. If we take the sun, then we take the term ruler of the sun, which is Mercury, which also is important. Okay, the ancients didn't have computers, and they didn't calculate the chart so fast like we do. We can look at both term rulers and sign rulers, both luminaries, but most of the time, one of them will be much more predominating, and then we will focus mostly on the term and sign ruler of that luminary than the other one, and seek a clearer biography written through it and not the other luminary, even though the other luminary will always be important and will also always show other aspects of the soul of the person. Okay, so now let's try to calculate the Kurios. So let's see. The ruler of the MC in this chart is Venus. Is there a planet in the MC? No. Of course, yes, there is the moon, but the moon is the luminary itself, so we don't consider it. Venus is not on an angle, but it's in a succeedent house and sign from the angle, so it's considered powerful. Let's see. The ruler of the ascendant is the sun. So again, a luminary cannot be the lord of the nativity. So, and of course, we said before that the sun has also the connotation of the 12th sign, which is the cadent whole sign. So we would not consider the sun as the Lord. Is there an ascendant? Is there a planet on the ascendant? know there's a planet in the sign of the ascendant, which is Mercury, but Porphyry gives a lot more weight on a planet being in the terms of the ascendant, which will always mean that it's, a couple of degrees or from the ascendant. And here Mercury is pretty far from the ascendant. So maybe he's a candidate, but not that powerful. Let's see. The ruler of the moon, of course, is also considered as the lord of the nativity, and Venus is the ruler of the moon, which is also the predominator. We know that from before. And the ruler of the lord of fortune. The lord of fortune is in Cancer. The moon is the ruler of the lord of fortune. So again, the dispositor of the moon is Venus. So most of the roads go back to Venus. And the ruler of the prenatal lunation, which is this, which is in Gemini, is Mercury. So Mercury has another weight to it. But still, Venus is much more prominent than Mercury. Venus is a strong morning star, and it's about to set 7 days after the birth, heliacally set, which makes it eminent, astrologically speaking, for the ancients. Although we would always prefer rising than setting. And Mercury is about to station and set. So Venus is in a better placement. So in general, Venus here is also the Kurios. It is also the executive power of Frida Kahlo's chart. So she's exhibiting the power of the chart through Venus in the world. And this is also what Porphyry was speaking about, the Lord of the Nativity, the Lord of the Nativity also being the domicile, the domicile master. So in the case of Frida, Venus is the same master of both. And of course, she is conjunct Pluto, which is something that the ancients wouldn't have considered, but she is very malefically squared by Saturn from the 8th house. And we know about the tragedies of Frida Kahlo's life and Frida Kahlo's love life, in specifically, which are part of the, you might say, the depression that she holds in her soul. And she, in a sense, incarnated too. Yeah. So this is Frida Kahlo's chart, and I did everything very fast, but I think we can have another example. No, Carol?
Michael, if you have time, that's wonderful. We would appreciate it, but if you don't, we also understand.
I do.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, so let's do another example.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this is the Donald again. The reason I brought up his chart because he has something pretty unique that Porphyry speaks about. And this is, he has a planet in the terms of the ascendant. This is Mars, of course. And not only is he in the terms of the ascendant, he also rules these terms. Okay, so although the ascendant is about to change, it is still a Leo ascendant, and Mars is still in the term of the ascendant. So Mars is very powerful, and we see right away that he's a candidate for being the Lord of the Nativity, for being the one executing the plan of the life. If we go back and consider the predominators, there are other interesting factors in Donald Trump's chart which are interesting to consider. First of all, although this is a day chart and the sun is very highly placed in the 10th quadrant house and the 11th whole sign house, he was born on an eclipse. So the moon was eclipsed, which in my view further lowers the moon to being able to predominate in any way. Of course, it does have its own different expressions in Donald Trump's life, and I won't try even now to get into all that the psychology of his emotional nature. But I think that gives even a much more powerful weight for the sun in this chart, eclipsing in a sense the moon, although it's in its full phase, it's eclipsed. It's just an interesting thing to think about. So the sun is in Gemini. The domicile master of the sun is Mercury, and Mercury is in Cancer. It's in the 11th quadrant house, and it's about to likely rise, which is pretty powerful. It's very fast in phase. It's almost 1.5. It's natural. It's average speed. So it's pretty fast, which is also considered a dignity. And but it's in aversion to the sun. So this is another nuance that we should take into consideration. If we look at both rulers, the domicile ruler, the sign ruler or the term ruler, the one that is best aspecting the predominator will most of the time takes charge of the life. The form of Donald Trump's life is the Gemini form. This is the quality of the life energy in his chart. It moved through that Gemini energy, that agile, mutable, talkative, airy sign, and it modulates or tried to modulate it through the Cancer energy. And we see, and the 11th house and everything that Mercury does in this chart. But because of the aversion, it makes it less, how do you say, less able in a sense. The fact that it is in sextile to Mars, and Mars is so prominent on the angle, on the rising angle, and is also the term ruler of the sun, would probably make Mars more fit to being the domicile master of Donald Trump's chart. So we have another instance here of a domicile master, which is also the Lord of the Nativity. Although we should never disregard Mercury. We should never disregard the sign ruler of the Predominator, even if it's an inversion. So we should look at Mercury and see the basic characteristics of Donald Trump's soul, in a sense. And we can see that Mercury is just separating from a square to Neptune. And generally, he's pretty much void of course, although, of course, if we take bigger orbs, then he is um, applying to Jupiter and then to Saturn. Now, for the Lord of the Nativity, although Mars has the most is the strongest candidate, there's another strong candidate for being the Lord of the Nativity in Donald Trump's chart, and this is Jupiter. The reason is that Jupiter is stationing on the day he was born. He was stationing direct. So a station, according to the ancient literature, is also a phase. It's a phasis. It's a powerful declaration of a planet in its orbit around the sun. So Jupiter is powerful in this chart. So Jupiter might also take control. And Jupiter's agenda, of course, here is the second house. So it has to do with finance, and Jupiter, of course, it has a natural significance of success and finances and things of this sort. And Jupiter is also the ruler of the moon, and he's in a good place to aspect many of the planets in Donald Trump's chart. So another candidate for being the Lord of the Nativity, I would say, is Jupiter. And in the third place, I would say it's Mercury, because Mercury is likely rising. I can see right now that Mercury is also is anticia to the sun, which could mitigate the aversion in a sense, because it's considered a kind of an spectral connection because of the inverted percentage of light between the two sides of the solstice point. So this is Donald Trump's chart. And let's see if I have another example. We'll do a last one. Yep. That was, okay. Yeah, maybe that's a good time to take questions.
Yes, Michael, I do have a question for you from Marlene. And she asks, in determining some of these, where he says on the ascendant, if the luminary is instead on the descendant or in the seventh, can one use it?
I'm not understanding. She's talking about the Predominator or the Lord, or?
Marlene, if you're there, can you type this specifics in? She's asking, yes, I'm not seeing her type anything in. Oh, here. Okay. She said, I'd have to see the earlier slides again. Okay. So it was back on a slide.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
So do you see the slides right now? Oh,
I can see them, yes.
Okay. Was she speaking about the Predominator, or?
She says where he says on the ascendant, if the luminary is instead on the descendant or in the seventh, can one use it?
Okay. Yeah, I would say this. If the luminary, contrary to the sect, is on an angle, preferably the ascendant, but in a general angle, it could be the descendant, while the other one is on the cadent house, then it's the same instance. But the ascendant is the strongest, therefore the predominance is secured, no argument. But as it said here, if the luminary continuity to the sect is angular. So that could be the 7th house, the 4th house, the 10th house. The only condition is that the other luminary is cadent. I hope that was clear enough.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
And Sarah, Sarah wrote, is there going to be a PDF provided for this presentation? Sarah, no, what we do is we actually send you the recording link. So you can stop that video, audio, anytime you want throughout the presentation. And then Marlene does write, yes, that's it. And there's a chart, I know, with that. So I guess Marlene's going to be doing her homework with that chart, further investigating this. Thank you, Marlene. Do we have any other questions from anyone? I'm just seeing if we have any more questions.
No problem. I have time.
Thank you, Michael, for the wonderful presentation. That's from Verna. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, great. So people are starting to type in, thank you, Michael, for all of your wonderful work. We certainly appreciate you sharing your knowledge of all these ancient doctrines and supporting us in our astrological journey and learning more. So thank you very much. And I'm just seeing a lot of thank yous coming in and that it was a wonderful presentation. So I think they're done with the question part of this. And Michael, are you doing anything else in the next couple of months going forward as far as any teachings online or anything that you want to share with us?
Not much is set for the next couple of months. I will be attending the ESAR conference September next year in Denver, and maybe doing something in England in May, a workshop, but this is still not secure, this is still not closed. But if you are interested in more lectures and workshop of this kind, you can write me your email and I will notice you when there is. I think that would be the best way.
Wonderful. And they have your website too that they can visit periodically and maybe subscribe to as well? Yeah,
unfortunately my website is still in Hebrew. I'm working on making it in English. But I just did a professional page in English in Facebook, so this might be the best way to follow me right now.
And when I pulled up your website, Michael, I noticed that Google Translate came up. So perhaps they can do it that way as well.
Okay, that's
through Google.
That's an option. Yeah, that's an option.
Great, great, wonderful. And again, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate, Michael, your research and your historical knowledge and all you do. And look forward to revisiting with you another time. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. And sorry if I was really fast. I wanted to put everything.
Oh no, it's such a large subject that, yes, you're right. We do need a full workshop.
Yeah.
But it's a great, it was a great introduction to your work and to this important research and history. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Carol.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.